How did we happen to come to Auburn? We'd been in the Los Angeles area for 11 years, Highland Park and Los Angeles Highland Park, and Alhambra. Highland Park for 5 and Alhambra for 6.5. And Gay had felt like that our kids needed an opportunity to grow up in an area that was not metropolitan, since I came from Anaheim when it was a rural community, and she came from Upper Lake. And just felt like our kids deserved a right to grow up in an area that was more rural. And so we began to make known to the superintendents that we were looking for a move, particularly to Northern California. And Dr. Vogt called us in the summer of 1973 to ask if we would be interested in coming to Auburn for an interview here, which we did in July of I did in July of 1973. I remember well, it was a hot summer day, and we had driven from Alhambra up to Napa to drop off Gay and the kids at her folks in Napa. And then I drove to Sacramento to meet Dr. Vogt. We drove together from Sacramento up here to Auburn. Met the board back in the kitchen. Borbys, Andersons, Matsons, Lippiotts, Bjorlins, and the interview. And as we went back after the interview, on the way back to Sacramento, Dr. Vogt said, "Now you have an interview tomorrow night. I have an appointment for you at Stockton First Church if you would be interested in an interview at Stockton." And I said, I doubt that would meet our needs, that we'd be going right back into the city. Gay confirmed that Auburn was the choice. And so we allowed our name to come up for a vote, and the vote was positive, and we accepted, and we moved to Auburn with our U-Haul truck and cars on my birthday, August 28, 1973. And we're welcomed by a host of people. They had dinner prepared for us in the kitchen back here. And my brother Gail drove the van. I drove one of our cars. Gay drove another one. They really had the van all unloaded by the time that we got here. So that's how we arrived. And we began in the pulpit on, I think it was September the 9th, 1973. First impression was of the quality people here in the Auburn Church of the Nazarene. We had come from a good church, a strong church in Alhambra, but I was just very impressed with the quality, the lay leadership, that they had a sense of grace and class and wisdom, and they did things right. From the way they conducted a shower to just the whole mode of operation. And that has continued over these 30 years, that quality people who have a sense of fitness and rightness, have high ideals, high motivations. Yourself, your family. I marvel at the faithfulness of the Vaughn family. The boys all have stayed faithful to the Lord and done well, and the grandchildren are doing well. It's just, that was the first impression, that these are quality people and they do things right. Of course, it was quite a change from the city. In the wintertime when it rained, at the parsonage next door, we were on ditch water, and so the water was muddy brown. And Will Riley, the custodian, would tend to the treatment facility there in the reservoir shack, the pressure tank and all of that, keeping the chlorine in it. That was one eye-opener. Another was, we had one of the Sunday school classes met in the living room on Sunday morning at the parsonage next door. And Alan Matson's junior high class met in the garage. Half of the garage was made into a classroom. And so every Saturday night or Sunday morning we needed to arrange the living room for the class and make sure in the wintertime that the heater was on, electric heater was on in the garage for the junior high class. Those were some of the early memories. Of course, we only had this building, didn't have the new addition. And so the office was also a classroom. The 5th and 6th grade kids met in there. It was, the mimeograph was in there. Lily Bingham's Sunday school office was just outside the office door, a little table and a rack. And so it was making do well with limited resources. Out here was, of course, open. That's where the leach fields were for the sewer. And when it rained a lot in the winter, as it did that first year, 50 inches of rain, it could get to be, you'd notice that the leach fields were out there. Yeah. So those are some of the early impressions of earliest memories, but good memories. Quality people, loving God, and from the beginning, God was moving and people were coming to faith. Don and Carol McMasters came to the Lord in that spring of Easter time of 1974, and have stayed faithful to the church, and so good memories. You ask some of the memorable people in the church. Okay to do it this way? Of course, when we arrived, the strong lay leadership was already here. I think of Bud and Lorraine Anderson, and Ted had already gone off to Point Loma, and Dan was up in Northwest Nazarene. My recollection, Andersons, the Borbys, Rich and Bev, Alan and Barbara, Don and Mary Ann, Liz Figueroa, Wes and Carolyn Bjorlin. Those are some. The danger of mentioning some, your own folks, the bonds here. You miss some people, and I wouldn't want to slight anybody. But quality people, and they were successful in their business. Of course, the Vaughn family lived 3 doors up the street with their 4 boys, and David and Tad were the same age. By the way, when we came, Tad was 15, Jana was 12, and Stephen was 9. The Reiners lived up the street, Nancy and Dale. And so there was a strong bond with some marvelous people, great people. When I arrived, one of the things when I met the board was they told me that there were plans for a building program, and did that bother me? I said, well, it's probably not my favorite thing, but it didn't bother me. But they had a good set of plans from a building designer down at Ripon, California, Dr. William DeBoer. And we broke ground in the summer of 1975, so it'd be not quite 2 years after I came. In the meantime, we had been refining the plans and arranging the funding and such as that. People loaned money to the church, individuals did. We borrowed, I think it was about $100,000 that we borrowed from our own people to build the new addition. And I could be wrong on that. But we hired Harold Watkins as our general contractor to oversee it. It was the best building program I've ever been in. It went so smoothly. Harold was such a sweet spirit, and the people had a mind to work. We began in 75, and we occupied the building, not totally finished, in the summer of 76. The unfinished part was like finishing off the gymnasium. But that opened up the door for so many things to happen that could have not happened if we didn't have that building. And through this time, the church was growing. You have to hand it to Reverend Klassen and the church for moving from over on Sacramento Street when they did in 1963, because what that did was position the Church of the Nazarene here with a new facility at a time when Auburn was just beginning to grow. And so that we were able to be here with the facilities as the church, as the community grew, the church could grow with it. With the new facilities, we were able to move classes down out of the upstairs where the children were meeting and nursery was happening, all kinds of make-do situations. And as the church grew, When I came, Scott Sampson was a part-time youth pastor here, had come here to be with Pastor Decker about 6 months, I think it was, before I arrived. He and Beth, he supported himself by other work and drew a small, modest part-time salary here. About 1976, just about the time we finished here, he left to go back to Little Rock to take a full-time position there, and we scrambled for help. We hired Dan Anderson after he got out of college. I think it was 1977, part-time. Dan supported himself driving taxi. Not a glorious job in Auburn, but part-time youth pastor here until he and Melody were married and went off to seminary. Then we hired Ted Anderson for a summer, kind of an interim youth pastor for a few months. We were looking for leadership because we were growing. I conducted the choir even for a while after Beth Anderson, who was our choir director, married and moved. So we needed leadership to continue to grow, and we were looking for a combination youth and music person. But in the meantime, in about the summer, the spring of 1978 or 77, I forget now, Jeff McFarland was looking for an internship up at Chico in his Parks and Recreation major. And somehow we got word of it, and he came here, lived with the Matsons, as he was going to do a quarter of work for credit at Chico State in youth ministries. And he was such an effective youth minister, we decided, but he's not musical at all. Dare we step out on faith and hire both a music and a youth man? And so it was 1978. We hired Jeff and Randy DeGraw, Randy out of Azusa Pacific, and they came on staff. Both were single at the time, both married that first year, 1978. And their addition opened the door for the church to grow in a very significant way with quality music and quality youth. And so the church began to have an image in the community of providing a full family service ministry. And from 1978 till 1982, we began to fill up the facilities, and 1982 went to double services, the fall, November of 1982. That began, when we went to double services, it raised the question, where are we going from here? Because we only have a couple acres here. And we began a long-range planning time with Rick Conklin out of Long Beach First Nazarene, exploring what are the options, what could we do here to maximize growth. And 1983 brought a recommendation from the Long Range Planning Committee to the board, recommending that we move in the direction of relocation and expansion, because we could not see how we could provide parking to match numbers on the limited amount of space that we had. So we began looking for property that would accommodate the future. It's a long story. Looked at a property over off Covey Road above fire department, CDF. Neighbors didn't want us there. We looked at the land on Nevada Street opposite now where the new Stadium 10. We had an opportunity to buy 16 of that 32-acre parcel on the west side of Nevada Street, across from the Stadium 10, which was half of that. But all that was owned by 4 people, and the other people had a first right of refusal. And so when we made the offer to buy it from the one party who owned that half, the other parties exercised their right to buy it, and so we did not buy there. And ended up, the realtor talked with Clinton and Clarella Marriott, Karen Vaughn's parents, your sister-in-law, and they consented to sell us the 12 acres, 1985, which was on that parcel of Karen's Vaughn's home where she grew up in that farmhouse there. And we signed the contract with Clinton and Clarella to buy that 12 acres. I think it was $200,500. In March, we finalized the deal. We kept it in escrow until we got our conditional use permit from the county to build there, which was about October of '85. And that was an open door. That was in God's plan, and I'm grateful to the Marriotts for selling that beautiful piece of ground to us. A prime location for the church and its future. Of course, people have moved in, and so we grew by people moving in as well as by conversions. But as I think back, Don and Carol McMasters coming to the Lord in that beginning time, Roger and Honey Broda a couple of years later, and there were others along the way. In the early 1980s, the Van Orts came, the Hovises came, Joe and Chris Howard came, Ron and Linda Oates and their family were reached by the church in the middle 80s, 1985, 86, Alan and Pam Norton and their families, Alan Carol Tallman, Joe and Judy Grigonis. These are some of the people that came to the Lord in life-changing ways. And there are others, boy, I don't want to miss anybody, but these are some of the folk that Tim Hansen and Lynn, Larry and Jennifer Finney. You look around and just on a friend day back in the middle 80s, Bill and Betty Van Ort invited Tom and Sue Ray. Tom was a new teacher out at Rock Creek, to his church on Luther Road. Tom didn't know, if I remember right, Tom didn't know the name of the church, which, remember when people were parking out here, you couldn't see the sign that said Church of the Nazarene because the parking was right in front of it. But he came to church and, of course, have stayed here. Jim and Erica Fallbeck reached through a friend day in the early 1990s. Just some marvelous people and some marvelous conversions and some marvelous transfers in of people that have just found a church home here. Dick and Suzanne Bertelson. The list goes on and on. Well, the church has changed in size. It hasn't changed in mission, hasn't changed in its basic character. We are a Church of the Nazarene with our emphasis on full commitment to the Lord and holy living, disciplined lives, wanting God to write the law of God upon our hearts, and that has been true of this church from its beginning days. Of course, as growth comes, there are changes have come in staff ministries, and the movement from where it's just a family church, and the church board is a family, and it does everything kind of as a family operation to committees and the delegation of responsibilities. I sensed that in the early 80s as we were growing, the need to delegate more and to organize more, because the pastor could not make all the decisions himself, didn't have the wisdom to do it, didn't have the knowledge, and the significance of involving more people in decision making and in ministry. And I think now with Pastor Harris here and his vision of an outreach oriented church and the movement to small groups as a means of ministering to needs that can't be done as the church grows and grows. His vision of the pastor being the rancher, probably my role was more the pastor shepherd, the hands-on, but the church has reached a size where that can't be quite true the same way. And my role in the church now as a part-time elder person older person, part-time minister of pastoral care is an extension of Pastor Harris's arms, providing the personal touch to the congregation, granted though on a limited basis on a part-time role, but being his arms an extension of his ministry, serving him and serving the people. But these are significant days in the life of the church, and properly, rightly so, moving to the larger church with multiple services and multiple growth groups and multiple avenues of reaching people, but focused on reaching out. I remember on a Sunday night, and of course the front of the church then had the choir pews up there and the screens in front and the large pulpit and the dark stain on the pews, and I didn't realize this beautiful wood was underneath that dark stain. What a wonderful job Sierra Grace has done in restoring these and bringing out the beautiful wood. But Sunday night, and I was up in the pulpit preaching, and the congregation was kind of scattered, and Liz and Manuel Figueroa were sitting back here about, maybe a pew or two behind me, 3 or 4 pews behind me, where I'm sitting now. And I'm looking out of the congregation, a mouse came down the aisle, past them, and Manuel saw that mouse, and he about bolted out of his seat. Mouse came down and disappeared in the vents there, the ductwork and the steps of the platform. I never saw him again. But that's one of the more humorous things that I remember. And I remember the morning when it was a hot Sunday morning, and we were having classes down in the gym. The Seekers class had moved down there. So this hot August or July, whatever it was, we had all the air conditioning roaring. And just about the time we started the first song, the organ hit the circuit breakers blew, probably the pole outside, and so we were without any kind of power and couldn't restore it because it was up something on the pole that just had clipped. So we were without air conditioning, without the organ, without the microphone, without the lights. Just a reminder of how dependent we become upon modern technology. But there are a lot of happy times, a lot of humorous things. I remember baptizing you in the Adventist church, and you dog paddled out of the baptistry out there, Mark. You were probably 7 years old, 8 years old, but you did good. We have come from those modest beginnings of the tent revival in 1941 from those beginnings, the Carpenter's Hall and Eagles Hall and the Miller's apartment, to the church on Sacramento Street, to the church here now, to their church out on Parkside. And I'm excited about what is happening. I think that Pastor Harris is God's man and his vision to move us from where we have been, as blessed as the past has been. And God, when I came here, I felt that Auburn was a very special church. Unique in its potential, in its community, and I still think that it is one of the unique churches in our denomination which has had an impact. I think of Bo Castle. I didn't mention Bo. Our youth choir, under the leadership of Jeff and Randy back in about 1979, had been on tour, came back for their last concert here at the church. Ken Kendall and, did I mention the Kendall family and the people the church reached? I should have. Yeah, I didn't. Rich and Sally Kendall and their family. Oh yeah, significant. They had invited Bo Castle, a friend of theirs from high school, and at the close of the concert I gave a gentle invitation. Nobody responded. Concert was over, happy parents were greeting happy youth, and I was out in the center aisle, and Bo came up to me and said, "I'd like to do what you talked about." And so we sat down in the pew together, and he gave his heart to the Lord and never turned back, and became went on to become the student body president at Placer High, and went into ministry, and now back in Kansas City heading up this significant work. Other people in ministry out of the church: Dan Anderson, a missionary in Uganda, he and his wife Melody. Jerry Thomas, Pete Thomas's son, Nazarene pastor down in Texas. And of course Nathan Oates, youth pastor at Sacramento Arden for several years now, launching a new work on the district. And Caitlin Oates married Mike Peoples. They're our youth pastors down at Sutter Creek. These are some of the folk that come to my mind right now who are in ministry out of our church. Tell me about, you say, current duties at the church. Well, since I retired in 1997, after 8 months, Pastor Hull asked me to come back as a part-time minister of pastoral care. Pastor Archer renewed that, and now Pastor Harris has wanted me to continue on. It's been 7 years now since I retired. Time goes by rapidly, but I'm grateful for the chance for continued ministry. Part-time, 16 hours a week is what my job description describes, and basically caring about people, the new, the ill, the aged, the wandering, the people in crisis, simply trying to build bridges for the Lord and for the church, and wherever I can share Jesus Christ, who is the great hope of all of us and the love of my life. Our family, of course, in the 30 years since we've come here, Tad married Debbie Rutherford in 1981. The Rutherford family had come to the Lord just before I came, so that was providential. And Tad and Debbie were married in 1981, and they have 3 children. Tyler and Jessica now are 14, finishing Bowman School this year, 8th grade, and go to Placer High next year. Nathan, their youngest, is in the 4th grade at Bowman. Daryl and Jana, Tad and Debbie live over on Matson, off Matson on Rosine Court. Daryl and Jana, their 2 children, Travis and Nikki, they live up the street here. Travis is now 13. Nikki is just about, Nikki is 9. Travis is 13, that's right. Anyway, Tad works for the school district and as a maintenance person for Auburn Union Elementary School District. Debbie works for the Auburn Surgical Group as an office person. Daryl is a tile setter with Lance Mansweaty's Tile Company. And Gay is a happy grandma, taking care of the grandkids. So I just want to say to Parkside Church, thank you for letting us come and letting us stay around for these 30 years and for as many more years as God will give us a chance to be here. We're not going anywhere. At least we don't plan it. And we're so glad God opened this door. Best thing that ever happened to us was coming to Auburn. Parkside Church of the Nazarene, you're a special people. You really are. Never lose the vision, never lose the commitment, never lose the life of Christ in your hearts. God will bless you as He has in the past, He will in the future.